around the thing. So do you want to get started?
Yes, indeed. You know how we both are. We like to gather and welcome everybody. So that's what we'll do for the first few minutes as everybody is coming in. Hi, everyone. I am so honored. I'm on Black Women Views. What's up?
Oh, please. The honor is all mine. I am with the Star Jones.
Well, I'm just so glad that we had the foresight to actually collaborate. I cast it as an intergenerational conversation. Because I clearly am the elder auntie on this call, but everybody has just been consumed with this conversation about who is going to be picked for vice president.
Yes.
Did you ever expect that it would take on this sort of importance, even though it is an important job? I can't remember there being a time that it has taken on this level of importance.
Certainly not this level of importance, and certainly not this level of public, discussion about it. Normally, these things are very, very much behind closed doors, very hushed. So this is really a new kind of era, I guess, of presidential politicking.
And the conversation has gotten to be adversarial, which I definitely have not seen before. And
yeah,
I don't know if people know this, but I've been a Democratic surrogate for every Democratic presidential nominee since Bill Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
I actually was a Carter girl. I was not able to vote at that time. I was too young, but that was my first time being a volunteer. And then from that point on, I actually became a surrogate, and then I became an official campaign surrogate starting with the Clinton campaign.
Okay.
And then I've done every single presidential campaign since then. But I find it just interesting. I have never once gotten involved in this many conversations about the vice president.
Yeah. And I think,
politics, girl.
Yeah, well, I've been following politics this closely for 20 years because I got started in high school, really being super interested in all of these politics things. But this year takes on so much more importance, in particular as a Black woman. And, I wasn't super into the primaries. Like, last year, this cycle was the first time I really, really got into the primaries. And so seeing Senator Kamala Harris's campaign being the first Black woman that I've seen and when I've been interested in running for president really kind of drew me in much earlier and much more passionately than before. So now it just seems like it didn't stop once Joe Biden made that pledge that he was going to select a woman vice president, then that kind of upped the ante. And to your point, some of the rivalry and the different factions of the debate.
And what I found to be interesting is, your excitement in this generation to see Senator Harris as, a Black woman running for the highest office in the land. I imagine the same pride was felt when Shirley Chisholm did it so many decades ago.
Yeah.
You didn't have the level of engagement because you didn't have social media, digital media at that time. So historically, obviously, the feeling is as intense, but the way it was manifested was not the same. And Senator Harris talks about that quite often, how honored she is to follow in those footsteps.
Yes, she does. Yes, she does.
So full disclosure, I was and still am a Kamala Harris surrogate. I said, when we were looking at what we were going to do about this topic, we both said, the one thing we're not going to do is we're not going to tear down any other Black woman or any other woman candidate.
Right.
Since Joe Biden has made a commitment to selecting a woman as his running mate, I think it's very important for women to be supportive of other women. That's just me.
Yes.
And I know that's you, especially when it comes to Black women.
Yes, absolutely.
So, there's no person that we are going to not support.
Right.
But we both kind of looked at each other. It was funny, and we'll share this intimately. We kind of looked at each other and said, why are we going to pretend? Everybody knows that I'm a surrogate
for
Kamala Harris. Everybody knows that your mouth runs morning, noon, and night for Kamala Harris.
Exactly. But you know what? But to be fair, we did approach we did approach it as a first of all, this is a Black woman. A Black woman needs to be on the ticket conversation first and foremost.
That's what the conversation starts with.
Right. But we did go through some methodologies. We did go through some things that made it almost it would have been phony to try to have a conversation on a very generic and broad level.
Right.
And so that's the
absolutely. And I think I don't want to interrupt you, but I think that was what makes you so authentic when you're talking politics, because it's, as I described, straight no chaser when it comes to Reecie. You're gonna say it the way it is, girl. You're gonna say it, and I hope that's my reputation also.
Absolutely.
But one thing that you do, and I am absolutely trained to do, is to look for the evidence, to look for the facts. To support your position, right?
Right, exactly.
So how did you come to knowing that a Black woman needs to be on the ticket right now?
Well, you know, for me, it's never been about polling. It's never been about necessarily trying to make an argument on electability or even turnout. It's always about representation. And the stakes are so high for Black people, and particularly Black women. We have so many issues that keep getting put on the back burner time and time again. And the only person that I truly trust to handle that is a Black woman. Because Black women are the ones who have to make a way out of no way. Black women are the ones who have to crawl over glass to get anything accomplished, because nobody's going to make it easier. And Black women are the ones who are most equipped to make the case and not throw us under the bus, because I am sick and tired of this back of the bus mentality and this pat you on the head and say, thank you, next, see you in 4 years. Our issues cannot wait another 4 years. Our issues cannot wait until we are in the Oval. Our issues need to be addressed right now.
And I completely agree with you. As you start to think about it, Black women have forever and ever been the ones that society has relied upon to fix their stuff.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And we've been fixing their stuff for a very long time. So I figure if we have to be the ones to fix their stuff, we should be in the table when the stuff is being decided, right?
Exactly.
And this is an amazing time in our country, because there are so many qualified women qualified to be president of the United States, much less vice president of the United States. And there are so many qualified Black women, and especially some of the names that we have been hearing around the water cooler and in pretty much every single media poll. And we thought, for those who are joining us today, we thought it would be important for us to acknowledge some of the women who have just done an amazing job in their own careers as professionals and bring so much to the table, and who are a part legitimately of the conversation.
Right.
Can we start out with the time is now, historically is right. The math is 100% correct, because in order to have a successful campaign and thus a successful presidency, you need to have somebody that's going to motivate the most reliable base of the Democratic Party, and that is Black women.
Exactly. 100%.
So we came up with, Reecie and I worked on what we call the 20 for 20 list. And let me just give you a little background on that. Whenever I want to learn about somebody, I like to make a list of their assets and liabilities, okay? And I know that this country is facing a tremendous amount of hard work, and the next administration is going to have to do some really heavy lifting, right?
Right.
So I started to put together a list of the topics that I thought a presidential administration would need to hit on day one.
Exactly.
And then you ran with it, to be honest with you, and added even more topics. And together we now have 20 of the top issues that an administration will have to deal with literally at 12:01 p.m. on January 20th, 2021.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Day one, right?
Day one readiness. It's not, we don't have time for training wheels. We have to be ready on day one. And Black women fit that bill. Let's just be clear about that. It's not a token thing. It's not a cosmetics thing. It's not a symbolism thing. It's readiness that we're talking about.
And you know, when we were talking about this, Reecie, you said that it's important for us to invite others to use this model. Go ahead and explain what you mean by that.
So we built this as a conversation about why a Black woman needs to be on the ticket. And it's impossible to go to the level of depth that we're going to go into with this conversation for 5 different women. And so when we looked at these criteria, the person that hits every single bill, and it's not to say that somebody else doesn't, but a person that we determine has the most depth and hits every single criteria out of the park is Senator Kamala Harris. That is not, again, to try to say that somebody else is deficient or any kind of way, but we are going to use this time to go through that list of 20 for 20 for Senator Kamala Harris. But we absolutely would love to see any other 2 people, 2 Black women or any woman of any race come together and hold this exact kind of substantive conversation that we're going to engage in on these 20 topics. These are not topics that are meant to skew any way or another. You're gonna see it covers everything under the sun. And so this, like I said, if you all have a person that you prefer, or you have a person that you think is not getting enough shine, please continue this conversation in the same way that Star and I are gonna continue this conversation today.
So you laid it out 100% complete. Everybody is invited to take the 20 for 20 list and match any candidate up against that 20 for 20 list. And I encourage you to actually do that.
Yeah.
Because that will be a way for you to determine, are you just, hanging with somebody because you're hanging with somebody, which, by the way, that might be a legitimate reason why.
Right.
Or are you going to have a substantive conversation on what the country needs to move forward?
Right.
And so as Reecie said, we looked at all of the phenomenal Black women, and it behooves me and for us to mention their names, and we might as well just do it in alphabetical order. The names that have been really mentioned prominently and we give honor to, start with Stacey Abrams, and then we'll just go back and forth.
Okay.
Stacey Abrams, obviously you all know, is a lawyer, a voting rights activist, an author, and she served in the Georgia House of Representatives for 10 years, 2007 to 2017. She served as minority leader from 2011 to 2017, and in 2002, at the age of 29, she was appointed the Deputy City Attorney for the City of Atlanta. So she's got a load of experience, but the part that is impressive is in 2010, Leader Abrams became the first woman to lead either party in the Georgia General Assembly and the first African-American to lead in the House of Representatives. And so her name absolutely should be on the list of people that Vice President Biden is looking at for a running mate. Reecie, next.
All right, let's go to Mayor KEISHA Lance Bottoms. KEISHA Lance Bottoms is the 60th mayor of Atlanta. She's a lifelong public servant. Mayor Bottoms is the only mayor in Atlanta's history to have served in all 3 branches of government, serving as a judge and city council member before being sworn in as mayor. And her profile has certainly skyrocketed throughout this, in response to her handling of COVID-19, as well as how she's handling the Black Lives Matter protests in there. And she was actually named co-chair of the DNC platform committee. So she already has a major role to play in the Democratic National Convention coming up.
Magnificent. The next is a name that we recently heard being put on the list, but it's not like we haven't known about her. That's Congresswoman Karen Bass. Congresswoman Karen Bass is in her 5th term representing the 37th Congressional District in California. She also serves as chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. Prior to serving in Congress, Congresswoman Bass made history when the California Assembly elected her to be its 67th speaker, catapulting her to be the first African-American woman in U.S. history to serve in this powerful state legislative role. So in terms of being able to reach across the aisle, Congresswoman Karen Bass got that on lock. She has known how to do it, and her colleagues recognized her for that. So her name is being prominently mentioned.
Yes. Reecie? Let's talk about Ambassador Susan Rice. Susan Rice has served as the 24th U.S. National Security Advisor to President Barack Obama from 2013 to 2017, and U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations from 2009 to 2013. The United States Senate confirmed her as ambassador by unanimous consent. That is pretty spectacular. We know how much the Republicans were obstructing President Obama, so that's a major accomplishment.
Absolutely. Folk still mad at Ambassador Rice because she did her job and she did it brilliantly. She's one of the smartest women that I've ever met in my whole career. Just sitting down and talking to her, I had the unique opportunity to do a one-on-one interview with her, and her insight into foreign policy is just second to none. She is an amazing woman.
She's unmatched there, yes.
Absolutely. And then we have Congresswoman Val Demings, who is representing Florida's 10th Congressional District in the House. She's previously had a distinguished 27-year career with the Orlando Police Department. And in 2007, she made history when she was appointed to serve as Orlando's first female chief of police. But most of you all probably got to know Congresswoman Val Demings when she was on fire as one of the House managers during the impeachment of Donald Trump. And she represented like nobody's business because of her amazing law enforcement background, her dedication to justice. Congresswoman Val Demings has been thoroughly discussed in this discussion when it comes to a Black woman being a credentialed running mate for Joe Biden. And that brings us down to the distinguished United States Senator from California, Reecie.
Miss Kamala Harris. Y'all know that I could talk about Senator Harris all day, but star two. But we're going to stick to this prepared remark that we have because we're gonna move on to the discussion. But U.S. Senator from California, she sits on the Senate Committee on the Budget, Homeland Security, and Governmental Affairs, Federal Spending Oversight and Emergency Management, and the Judiciary, and the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. She began her career as the Deputy District Attorney in Alameda County, ultimately becoming the 27th District Attorney of San Francisco and the 32nd Attorney General of California. She has been the junior senator from California since 2017 and only the second African-American woman elected to serve as U.S. Senator ever.
Yes.
So those are our very distinguished and, as you put it, credentialed, not cosmetic, Black women that are in the VEEPSTAKES conversation.
And so you all now understand that we say the time is now for a Black woman to not just be talked about or considered, to actually be on the topic. To be on the ticket. And as you start to think about being on the ticket and what that actually means, you really will need to look at what the heck is going to be needed to put this country on a path for success in light of the complete cray-cray that we have been subjected to over the past 3.5 years. We just can't take another 4 years. And so the importance is we just can't even start with. So let's look at the 20 things, okay? Let's start with number one. They're not in a particular order, but let's start with number one. And if you don't mind, Reecie, I'll start with what I actually consider to be one of the major things, and that is executive acumen, okay? And what I mean by that is she knows how to get stuff done, okay? She know how to get it done. She's been calling the shots. She has deliberate and decisive decision-making ability. So executive acumen is #1 on the top 20 list.
Right.
So, Reecie, you already laid out that she has been a 27th district attorney of San Francisco, but I don't think people understand what that entails, right?
Right, exactly.
So you're looking at, you know her background as well as I do. To just be written down 27th district attorney of San Francisco, people don't realize that means she was the chief executive of 260 employees with a $40 million a year budget, okay?
Right.
All right, so now that's executive leadership, right?
Exactly, yep.
And her accomplishments were just amazing when it comes to transforming operations. She implemented something that we live by every day. She implemented emails for the San Francisco District Attorney's Office. She created the LGBT hate crimes unit, the environmental justice unit, the child sexual assault unit. I mean, those were transformational items as the 27th District Attorney of San Francisco. Then next, Reecie, go ahead.
So, and I just want to add that she wasn't a case manager, okay? She was an executive. So a lot of people don't understand.
So people understand what that means.
So what a lot of people seem to think of is when they think of a DA, she's referred to often as a prosecutor. And yes, the DAs prosecute people, but she's not a person who has her hand in every single pot. There were literally 16,000 felony arrests every year, 2,000 misdemeanor arrests. Half of those were going to, were adjudicated in some kind of way by the office. So she did not have involvement on that. What she was, as Star pointed out, was an executive, a transformational executive. And she continued that executive leadership when she went on to be elected, the first Black woman, the first Black person to be elected as Attorney General in California, and only the second Black woman ever at that point to be elected Attorney General. The first one, she was elected in the 90s. So that was much earlier. But anyway, let's talk about her executive leadership there. So she was the chief executive of the largest state Department of Justice. She oversaw 4,500 employees. 1,000 of those were lawyers, an operating budget of $800 million. And just for some context here, 4,500 employees is almost the same number of employees as Hyundai USA. It's
as in double, the car company. As in the car company, okay?
Yes, and double the employees of YouTube. Everybody knows YouTube. We think of YouTube as this massive site, but she was over double the amount of people that YouTube employs. So that just gives you a sense of how much responsibility was under her executive leadership. And she continued that trend of transformational work there. She created the Bureau of Children's Justice. She created the Division of Recidivism, Reduction, and Reentry, it's nicknamed DR3, and so many other initiatives as the Attorney General, where she came in there and she saw these glaring misses, things that were missing, and she put in action. And that's something where people say that, oh, she was stagnant or she didn't get involved in a lot of things. Oh no, she was definitely getting in there. And one thing I forgot to mention, she created the Mortgage Strike Task Force because she inherited this massive foreclosure crisis and mortgage crisis in California when she took office.
And Reecie, let me just put it in context for a bit, because they might tease me on Saturday Night Live for saying, you know, I'm a lawyer, but I don't care because I am. And I've known Kamala for 30 years, okay?
Right.
One, we're sorority sisters, which most people know, ski-wee to the sorors out there. So one, we're sorority sisters. Two, she pledged at Howard University when I was second supreme antibacillus at American University, okay? But more importantly, we both decided we were going to be prosecutors. And she went to the DA's office on the West Coast. I went to the DA's office on the East Coast. And oftentimes, and we've talked about this many, many times, we were the only Black women that would be in the room when we would meet in district attorney capacities, okay?
Right.
And she phenomenally went on to much higher heights I try cases, very serious felony cases, but she was in the leadership, in the executive leadership. And this is the thing that just made me so very proud of her. She, for most of her career, she was really in the rooms of leadership with no one else that looked anything like her, working to make change. And I know that to be fact. So she's been a clear leader when I talk about executive acumen. I'm not sure if people realize this, but she has held office at all 3 levels, local, state, and federal. She's held statewide office for over a decade, and she spent the majority of her professional career in the executive branch of government. So I'm telling you, when it comes to executive acumen, she's head and shoulders got number 1 of our list of 20 on lock. Would you agree?
Oh, unequivocally, absolutely.
So that's number 1. All right. Reecie, number 2 is what has been described as the Biden simpatico. Okay.
Yes.
Simpatico meaning relationships, right?
Right. And you know, sometimes this can be a bit of a hindrance, particularly for Black women and for Black people, because how often are you in a position to even have a rapport with a person of power? You know, that's how we end up getting locked out of a lot of these rooms, because we don't necessarily have that rapport that allows us to have that simpatico. Well, this is one area where, you know, Senator Kamala Harris certainly does actually have that simpatico with Vice President Joe Biden, because she's had a long-standing relationship with him, and particularly with his son, Beau Biden, actually even speaking at his funeral.
Do you know how close that has to be?
Yeah.
I mean, do you know how close that has to be?
Right.
I think about when I lost my mother 2 years ago, and the people that we selected to speak at her homegoing service, those people were people that you trust, depend on, that have had your back, that knew the person that you loved with all your heart and could speak of their goodness. And so for the Biden family to select her to give one of the eulogies, to participate in his funeral, that says to me that simpatico has been there. That's a familial relationship that you don't have to manufacture. And I know a lot of people talk, Reecie, about the so-called takedown during the debate.
Yeah.
But you have a really good theory about, you know, what happens during a debate.
It's a debate, as Senator Kamala Harris says. You know, punches are thrown, but it is we're hitting almost a year since that happened. And, you know, of course, there were some sour feelings at the time, but it seems like they have moved on from that. We have, you know, they've done many joint appearances since then. Senator Kamala Harris appeared at a rally, a major rally that drew huge crowds in Michigan, where she endorsed him. They've done a joint fundraiser. Their latest fundraiser had 1,400 people. It was the biggest Zoom fundraiser that he had to date. It raised over $3 million. You can't beat Obama, though. Obama raised, I think, 11 million yesterday.
He was no joke. I'm telling you that.
Yeah. So that you can't beat Obama, but also Senator Kamala Harris and Dr. Jill Biden are actually going to have a joint appearance this week as well. And so it's obvious that whatever kind of thing that people like to keep kicking up from that debate, it's water under the bridge. At least we like to hope so. And that shouldn't be a hindrance, because at the end of the day, they have that rapport, but they also have policy. They're in sync policy-wise.
Yes, you better tell it.
And one thing that people may not have remembered, when Vice President Joe Biden rolled out his Black agenda, he actually incorporated Kamala Harris, Senator Kamala Harris's, some of her policies specifically in his agenda. So obviously there is some synergy there. And we know that Senator Kamala Harris is not a person who's going to undercut him. She's going to be that trusted ally, that the person, you know, if she's the last person in the room, she's not going to steer you wrong. And what's important for us, she's going to represent a perspective that not everybody else is going to be able to bring to the table.
100%. You know, so as you think about this, they do agree on pretty much every policy issue.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to advocate for a position is not going to be difficult. And this is important because when you become president and vice president, you're gonna have to hit the ground running, like we say, on day one. And you have to split up some of the responsibilities. Now, the buck may ultimately stop with the president, but the president can't be in 962 places at the same time.
Right.
And he's going to have to depend on somebody to be able to represent him and to represent his agenda. And that's not going to be a very difficult stretch in the least bit. So that's number 2 on our list of 20. Reecie, take number 3.
Number 3, we have civil and human rights. And so this is where we don't just want to talk about rhetoric. We want to talk about the receipts. We want to talk about somebody who has had her skin in the game, who's got in there and thrown some punches and got some major wins. And so that's where we are with this civil and human rights. We have Proposition 8. I don't know if you guys remember that when Senator Kamala Harris was running for Attorney General, she ran on opposing Proposition 8, which was something that was voted and it was approved by ballot by California voters. And she was very instrumental in the court case that ultimately went to the Supreme Court. She filed an amicus brief. And that was what overturned gay marriage and basically legalized gay marriage in the country. And so she was right there, boots on the ground. And there's this video, I don't know if you guys have seen it, where she orders the clerk to issue the marriage license for the specific couple that went to the Supreme Court. So so she has been there and done this. She actually married when she was San Francisco district attorney. She married couples as soon as that was an option, and then it got overturned and things like that. So she has the LGBTQ rights. She has immigration advocacy as well. I mean, I know you guys know, as soon as the Muslim ban hit, she was right on the front lines protesting. She was putting legislation forth to overturn that. She's been on the forefront of fighting this child separation policy. She has been on the case. Remember Christian Nielsen? I know that some of these people were old news. She called up John Kelly actually on the phone, and he was pissed that she interrupted him while he is banning Muslims from this country. And so she has legislation after legislation, but she is not afraid to get in your face and tell you need to do something about this. So there's the Vote Safe Act. There's the 200th judge has been confirmed by the Donald Trump administration, because Mitch McConnell is hell-bent on getting as many judges in there to shift the judiciary for an entire generation or generations. And she has really been on the forefront of speaking out against their anti-civil rights record. Sarah, what else do you have on this one?
Yeah, and when you're talking about civil and human rights, I remember Hillary Clinton once said that women's rights are human rights and human rights are women's rights. And I think it's very important for us to look at all issues as women's issues, from the economy to education to infrastructure. All of that is a woman's issue. And the civil rights issue that we see right now that is playing itself out in the media, not just in the United States, but across the world, is going to need some true leadership that is committed to the promise of America, okay? Right. There is no way that we can sugarcoat the original sin of America was enslaving Black people from the continent of Africa and stealing and killing brown people who were here in this country when they landed, okay?
Right.
So we have to deal with those kinds of civil rights. We have to make sure that people have access to voting. We saw what was happening in Kentucky yesterday. We see that there's passion when it comes to voting. And I got to tell you something, if your vote didn't matter that much, why would they be trying so hard to stop you from voting? And that is why I say on the issue of civil and human rights, she has been 100% solid in working to make sure that civil and human rights are on the front burner of conversation. That's number
Absolutely.
3, right?
Yes, yep.
This whole thing about coalitions brings us to number 4.
Mm-hmm.
In order to be a successful president and have a successful presidential administration, you're going to have to engage in intersectionality.
Right.
And that's a word that, Reecie, you and I had a great discussion over, because that's something that, quite frankly, people don't know enough about. Mm-hmm. Would you explain it, please?
Yeah, I think it's, well, the best way of looking at it is, we so often look at our interests as factions, right? This is the AAPI faction. This is the Latinx faction. This is the Black faction. This is the LGBTQ faction. But there are people that overlap in these different factions, right? And so what Senator Kamala Harris understands is the intersectionality of all of these things, the intersectionality of race, the intersectionality of economics, and a variety of things, gender, all of these things. And so she approaches her policy making and her advocacy in a way that understands how all of these things play together. Like if we want to talk about Black maternal mortality, for instance, a lot of people think, oh, it's just, well, you know, people don't have healthcare and that's why you have a higher Black maternal mortality rate. No. Regardless of socioeconomic status, this is an issue. It's a race issue. Or if you talk about, you know, when you talk about any number of things, really, she understands and she advocates for, more importantly, all these things for the COVID-19. We see that Trump is out there calling COVID-19 Kung flu.
Can you imagine? That's so racist.
It's disgusting.
I know you hear that word thrown around, but no, that's just base racist. And he uses it in a way to try to fire up a crowd. So in other words, I'm going to be as racist as I can be so I can fire up the other racists. Okay.
And that's his lens. That's his lens. But then you have, on the other hand, you have Senator Kamala Harris that has called for, you know, that introduced a resolution condemning hate crimes against the Asian community. And so that's the end of the spectrum that we have here. And again, you know, a lot of times people think, well, if, you know, for instance, Kamala Harris is not a Latino. She's not Latina, but she has that history of advocacy in terms of fighting against these detentions, of helping get unaccompanied minors. She raised millions of dollars when she was Attorney General and helping them get lawyers, get representation. So she has such a wide variety of ways where she has advocated not just for Black people, not just for women, but for the Native American community and the discrimination that this administration has for them, in particular when it comes to COVID funding for Puerto Rico, which is American, and for the way that the disaster relief was handled there, or non-relief. So she really understands how all these things are, and she's intimately involved and educated. And like I said, the most important thing is not just to have bullet points, but how does it actually inform your advocacy and your legislative making, or your executive decision making? And I think she has that completely down.
And when you're not in front of that crowd, is that still your messaging? And that's the thing, you know, I'm traveling with her as a surrogate. You hear messaging in, quote, different rooms.
Yeah.
Consistency when it comes to intersectionality, coalition building, and bringing folks together is in every single room.
It really
and that's absolutely important. Yeah. It doesn't matter what room you're in, you still represent the people you represent. And she has been doing that for her entire career.
Yes, absolutely.
Which brings us to probably the issue that is being discussed more than anything right now, and that's criminal justice reform, because that is the front burner issue of our time right now. There is no question that Kamala Harris has 2 decades of advocacy and accomplishments in this area.
Right.
She is right now leading the charge with the Justice in Policing Act, which calls working on law enforcement issues. She has actually called it, quote, part of her life's work. Okay.
Right.
Like, that's the thing that when you go to bed at night, you think to yourself, have I done enough? Okay. She's created, again, you know how we believe in bringing receipts. She created the model programs like Back on Track.
Yeah.
She ended the cash bail situation, which is Pretrial Integrity and Safety Act. And let me tell you how that manifests itself. I'm not sure if people realize, but people who can arrest you, people who can prosecute you, people who can charge you with a crime, people who set your bail, they change your life. And Kamala Harris has said in the past that she thought long and hard because she knew that with the stroke of a pen, she could change somebody's life.
Yeah.
And so not being able to make bail on a case that may in fact get dismissed 48 hours later, 72 hours later, 1 week later, 30 days later, that has changed the trajectory of that individual's life right there.
Right.
They had to deal with child care. They had to deal with whether or not they paid their mortgage or their rent or their light bill that month. If they are taking care of anybody in their family, were they able to afford the medicine? Did their paycheck stop so there was no food to come in the house while they are pending in jail?
Yeah.
And ultimately get dismissed. Okay. So that cash bail situation is a major issue that it has to be the foundation for any criminal justice reform action. And Kamala has made it literally a foundation of her career.
And can I just pop in and say, absolutely. You know, for instance, Kayleigh Browder is a victim of not being able to post bail, and that just completely devastated his entire life. And it started over a backpack. That was the accusation. And Sandra Bland, another situation where she was stuck in jail over bail, and it's just inexcusable that that is what's happening in this country.
We have 2 young lawyers of color in New York State right now who have pending federal charges for vandalizing police cars. Now, of course, nobody thinks that that's a good thing. And clearly you're going to have to stand trial, or you're going to end up having to take a plea if in fact it's proved that you did commit this crime. But should you be in lockdown right now when you are 2 lawyers who could be assisting with your own case?
Right.
Come on now. The only reason why you're supposed to ask for bail is to assure that the person returns, okay, to court to face those charges. And so otherwise they're trying to just make it punitive. And so I just say to you, her work in criminal justice, especially in that area, has just been a yeoman's effort. You know, she can, she was an advocate for healthy communities, which is reimagining public safety. You've heard lots and lots of people talk about, quote, defund the police, okay? But Kamala was the first one to actually break it down, basically on my old show. I remember this.
Yeah.
She broke it down. She said, what are you talking about when you say defund? Because the first thing you want to do is everybody need to be on the same page about the words that you are using, okay?
Exactly,
Defunding the police does not mean take all the money out of the police force. That's not what it means.
Right.
It does mean reimagining how we talk about safety in our communities. And as she pointed out so eloquently, the communities that are thriving, it's not because they have more police officers in them. It's because they have more services.
Exactly.
Okay? They have better education. They have a great health system. Everybody got a job. Okay.
Right.
That'll make you not need police because you busy. You got things to do. Ain't nobody stealing nothing.
Exactly.
So she broke that down so thoroughly when it comes to that being a foundation of criminal justice reform, okay?
Right.
Women in prison advocacy, juvenile detention advocacy, no solitary confinement as it relates to juveniles. So I can give you chapter and verse on what she has done in the criminal justice area and what she will continue to do if given the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Yes, and so somebody asked on the YouTube, Yahari says defund the police doesn't mean taking money out of the police force. It does mean taking some money out of the police force, but redistributing it.
Yeah.
Add for public safety. It means reimagining what public safety means.
Yes.
Public safety doesn't mean somebody just standing on a corner patrolling with a gun and putting you in a chokehold. That's not necessarily the only thing that public safety is.
Exactly.
Community policing is a big major issue.
Yeah.
Okay. Putting resources back in the community leads to public safety. So if the police are going to start to be retrained to be doing public safety, Senator Harris's attitude is that is reimagining what funding should look like. So that's it.
And I think that her Back on Track program, which was the first in its nation reentry program, is a prime example of the concept of defund the police, because it was saying that it's much cheaper and much better investment in preventing recidivism, meaning people going back into the prison system, by investing in giving them health care, giving them dental care, giving them mental counseling, giving them parenting classes, giving them job training, giving them education. And so that program, I believe, if I might have the numbers a little bit off, but it's $5,000. That was the cost of her program, which she had to open up her Rolodex, as Latifah Simon said, and call up Nordstrom and call up her connects to get these resources for these programs. But she cut the recidivism rate down to just 10% from 60% for that same demographic. And so that was the first experiment, and it was a successful experiment in what a defunding the police, the concept of reinvesting our taxpayer dollars into preventing crime and creating healthier communities versus locking people up.
This is what I'm trying to tell you. That's number 5, y'all. Let's go to number 6. And Reecie, it's the thing that everybody's talking about, because we probably wouldn't have met if it wasn't for COVID-19, right?
Right. I mean, contrary to some people out here without these masks on and packing into these places, COVID-19 is still very much an active pandemic. And Senator Kamala Harris's leadership throughout this pandemic has been simply extraordinary. She was actually one of the first to call attention to the fact that the Trump administration was asleep at the wheel, saying, why is it that everybody from the Trump administration has bailed on this hearing? And so she has really stepped up to the plate. But one of the things, and this is a discussion again about the particular lens that Black women bring to the table. She was the first person that I recall seeing actually really bring home or call attention to the disparities that we now see very plainly, and how Black people are hit harder from COVID-19. And so not only did she just bring awareness to that and the fact that we have, these there's this environmental racism that has contributed to it. And there are all these systemic racism issue things, not personal responsibility, but systemic things that have led to a higher occurrence and deadliness of COVID-19 in the Black community. But she did something about it with her Racial and Ethnic Disparities Task Force. So that's legislation that she introduced specifically to ensure that number one, we were getting the right data about who was impacted and where they're impacted, but that FEMA actually puts resources to those specific places, because she is very concerned about things like ventilators. Remember how there was going to be a ventilator shortage? There have been testing issues, making sure that there's testing. A lot of Black people earlier in the pandemic had problems getting tests. They were turned away multiple times to get a test, and they later died. Right. We have plenty of stories like that. And so that was one of her focuses on the Racial and Ethnic Disparities Task Force. That's legislation. But also understanding the massive economic impact. And this is something that she doesn't get enough credit for. Senator Kamala Harris has an economics degree from Howard, okay? And so she actually introduced, along as she teamed up with Senator Bernie Sanders, for the Monthly Economic Crisis Support Act. And so not everybody, a lot of people got the $1,200 from the CARES Act. Well, what she wanted to do is make it a $2,000 a month basically universal basic income, and it would have been retroactive to March and go all the way through 3 past the end of the COVID pandemic. And then if you have children, $2,000 per child up to 3 kids. And so this would have been, like I said, it would have been, it's basically like the concept of universal basic income. It solves the fact that, hey, if you're not working, you can't pay your bills. And that's something that definitely disproportionately impacted our community. She also addressed food insecurity. And of course, there's the criminal justice aspect that's unique to COVID-19 because of masks. Her and Senator Cory Booker teamed up to make sure that to try to encourage rather William Barr to put out guidance about not discriminating or racially profiling Black people for wearing masks, or in some cases for not wearing masks, because we saw the violence in both cases for those folks. And then also she was on the forefront of seeing or of pushing for the early release of nonviolent offenders or people that were very near the end of their prison term, pushing Bill Barr on that. Now we've seen how what's his name, Manafort has taken advantage of it. Tekashi 6ix9ine has taken advantage of it. Well, Senator Kamala Harris wanted to try to help actual people who cannot afford a fancy defense attorney or an all-star legal team actually get released out of prison. And then she's also paid attention and brought attention to the immigrant detention centers and the spread of COVID there.
So what you pointed out, although that's number 6 on our list, it leads us to number 7, which is crisis management. Crisis management has to be on the top of agenda of day one when the new administration comes in. So you're going to need someone who is direct, decisive, and deliberate when it comes to issues that require immediate attention. And Senator Harris has had to make tough decisions in her career, as we pointed out earlier during the executive acumen section. Her crisis management when dealing with the hurricanes, particularly in Puerto Rico, as you pointed out just a minute ago, the mortgage crisis as Attorney General, a $2 billion settlement.
20
billion, thank you, a $20 billion settlement. And then of course the wildfires in California. Those are immediate crises that require attention to detail. It also requires pre-planning. It requires you actually to be intellectually curious about your fellow man and figuring out ways that you can be helpful. And that is something that she does on a regular basis. So crisis management, that's going to require a President Biden to look at his vice president and go, tag, you're it.
Yeah.
Go and get this done. And is there anybody that you would think that will be able to, on their own, go and get it done?
Right.
We have been mentioning in the quote VEEP sweepstakes. So that crisis management, especially in light of the COVID-19 aftermath, is going to be highly, highly needed.
Right.
The next one is cultural competency. Reecie?
And that means that you don't have to have a tour guide in Black spaces, in Latinx spaces, in AAPI spaces. You don't need a tour guide to help translate. Okay, what did they say? What that mean? I don't know what you're talking about. You know, you already know because you walk the walk and you talk the talk. And so that's really, really important because we are having a more digital campaign than ever. Okay, so this isn't going to be a situation where you can go out and have a rally of 20,000 people and hey, come on in and everybody hears the same message. You're going to have to be able to go to these kinds of Zooms and chats. Senator Kamala Harris is going to be on a criminal justice chat with other Black women progressive DAs from around the country or state's attorneys at 7 p.m. Eastern. And so she has the ability to go on Ebro in the morning, the ability to go to the Breakfast Club, the ability to go on Telemundo, the ability to go and Cooking with Kamala and Mindy Kaling. And so she has the range to be able to go into these spaces credibly and speak the language and speak to the experiences that make people feel like I can trust you, you know, and that's important because there's so much pushback in terms of the disinformation and misinformation campaigns. And so you're going to need a person who can combat that with interactions in these spaces. And so I think that's really, really, really important. And then let's be honest, Vice President Joe Biden is of a different generation. He's a white man. And so he does not have the same experiences that Senator Kamala Harris does as the child of immigrant parents, as an HBCU graduate, as a Black woman and also a South Asian woman. He does not have all of these experiences.
As a member of the oldest Black women's sorority in the history of the United States. Thank you very much.
Go ahead and call it out, Star.
You know, gotta call them sorors out. Let me be very clear. Absolutely. Cultural competency means something. It means you be able to walk in any room and be comfortable. Yeah. We make this joke. We are just as comfortable at the White Castle as we are at the White House. You know what I'm saying? Exactly. And you need to be able to do it all. And that's why you're going to need somebody that can roll through just like that. So that's number 8. Okay. Yeah. So that brings us to number 9. And number 9 is foreign policy. That's something that people aren't talking about as much as we need to, but just looking at what's going on across our world and the way we have been diminished as the so-called leaders of the free world because of us breaking our promises, us not being reliable, not able to be depended on, leave folk in the middle of a war without notice. These are the kinds of things that America, quote, did not do. Okay. Yeah. So you have to reestablish our position in the world, on the world stage. There is no question about that. And there's really very few people that are as qualified as Kamala in these VEEP sweepstakes that could really speak to that. I'm not sure if people know, but she is a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, which actually meets twice a week normally in a closed session. So you don't hear about that. You see the flashy Judiciary Committee and Kamala getting in that behind when she's cross-examining people, but you don't see her in the Senate Intelligence Committee, which meets twice a week. Now, these are the people who have our nation's secrets, okay? They know what's going on all across the world at any given time. So if some stuff is about to go down, these are the people who know about it before. Okay, so you have to be trusted to be in that position. So you're already well read. Yeah. You already are up on what's going on in hotspots across our world. As a member, she's briefed on the geographic issues like stability in the Middle East, Iran's nuclear program, terrorism threats. Members of the Senate Intelligence Committee from both parties have praised Kamala Harris as being whip smart. That's a quote. And you know, that sounds like an old white man, so you know where that came from. Whip smart. Right. And a great interrogator behind closed doors, which basically means what you see in front is what you get behind closed doors when there are no cameras there. She is in that behind, making sure we are represented across the world in the manner in which America should be represented. And we're going to have to reestablish our position. There is no question. She has done week-long trips to Middle East meetings with service members in Iraq, refugees from the war in Syria, and in Jordan. And I have to tell you, as the Attorney General, she led a delegation of state attorney generals to Mexico. We keep forgetting that our closest neighbor to the south is someone that depends on us also, and we depend on. We have to, there's a quid pro quo there. And she led that delegation to strengthen working relationships between government officials in both countries and to enhance efforts to combat transnational crime. So instead of calling folk rapists and murderers coming down an escalator, this is somebody who has reached out to say, what can we do as countries, as neighbors, to make sure that our policies are consistent to keep our people safe. So foreign policy, it's number 9 on the list, but clearly one of the most important. Right.
And we have to shout out Ambassador Susan Rice, because she certainly she's there. Nobody can, and as much as we love Kamala, Susan Rice definitely has, you know, just like Kamala has it 100%, no hands, nobody can touch her on criminal justice. Ambassador Rice has that But Kamala ain't no slouch either, and that was the point. She gets the same intelligence, somebody in the comments pointed out, that Donald Trump ignores in his presidential daily briefings. Senator Kamala Harris is getting that. So she is ready to step in on day one, knowing everything that's going on around the world right now.
And I think that is really important, that, you know, because when you see a Black woman who is a potential candidate for vice president, we always get relegated to the quote Black issues or the women issues. All of these issues are Black issues and women issues because they affect Black people and women.
Yes.
Okay. If it affects me, it's an issue that I care about. And that's why we are bringing the receipts on all the issues that you need for day one readiness, which brings us to number 10. We are halfway through. You see what we're talking about when it comes to bringing receipts on who's ready for day one? This is what we're talking about. And number 10 is the economy. And Reecie, you started talking about that a little earlier. What you were really breaking down was, this is not about a trickle down change, as Kamala likes to say. It's building from the bottom up.
Right. And I think that's really the key. The lens that Senator Kamala Harris brings is understanding. We can talk about big structural change all day, but we don't have time for trickle down structural change. We need money in our pockets right now. That's what the monthly Economic Crisis Support Act is about. She, again, I already mentioned, she has an economics degree from Howard. But what I appreciate about her record is she really does understand the importance of small business. And in particular, Black women are some of the most entrepreneurial businesses. And when we bring it back again to COVID, Black businesses and small businesses have been the most devastated by the impact of COVID. So she had introduced actually a Save Our Streets Act. It was bicameral legislation with Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley to provide grants actually to small businesses and minority-owned businesses and things like that. So she's always had that lens of understanding the value of small businesses and not just focusing on, you know, getting the moment, telling off a CEO of this company or that company. The bodega owner, as Senator Kamala Harris likes to say, and the beauty shop owner does not care about your moment on the Senate floor with Mark Zuckerberg. They want to know, are you going to put money in their pockets and help them actually keep their businesses open? And so that's an economic lens that she has. Also, her work in the as Attorney General, a lot of that work people don't understand is actually about consumer rights and consumer protections, you know. And so she has won countless multi-million-dollar settlements. Obviously, talking about the mortgage settlement again is hugely important because that was the largest mortgage settlement in the history of the country. And she walked away from a lowball offer. It wasn't like that just fell on her. No, she went for it. You know, she negotiated the hell out of that settlement. And so she's also done some things around the pharmaceutical companies and their predatory things. There's so many things that I can name, but the other things that I want to mention though is that she supports $15 minimum wage. There's legislation in the Senate that she supports, as well as universal child care. That is another area that really leads to a lot of economic inequality. And there are some other areas that we're going to bring some other stuff that she's proposed in here, but closing the wealth gap is another area that she has worked on. So there are so many things that she has put out there, trying to move the economy into a future with the Green New Deal, supporting that, trying to close the economic gap between Blacks and Black people and Latino and API community and the white community. The list goes on, but she has it down when it comes to the economic stuff.
And Reecie, remember, one of the things that she has talked about numerous times is a $600 unexpected expense can devastate a family.
Right.
Okay? See, that's called having a real relationship with reality, of understanding how people live their lives.
Right.
And I was just thinking to myself, if your car breaks down and you need some extra tires, that's $600. If you have to hook up at Costco, okay?
Yeah, exactly.
That's $600.
Yeah.
But it could be $800, it could be $1,000. If your refrigerator breaks, If your air condition breaks in the middle of the summer, if you're lucky enough to have an air conditioner,
right?
Those are $600 expenses that a lot of families in this country cannot sustain a $600 unexpected expense.
Right.
Those are the things that speak to an economic plan for righting the ship in the United States, a fair tax plan that Kamala Harris has put forth. Right. That speaks to righting the ship when it comes to the American economy, making sure you have not just minimum wage that is at $15 minimum, but that you have a livable wage.
Yes.
So you may have a job, but you don't need to have 16 jobs
to
make ends meet. That is not the way we should be working. And her economic plan speaks to that every single day. That's number 10. We'll move to number 11, and that's education. Her proposal to close the teacher pay gap, what has been lauded and adopted by others in this campaign. Other people have just taken her educational proposal in that and put it as a part of their campaign, and they give her credit for it. Absolutely. Her support of HBCUs, STEM education for women and people of color. She urged Comcast to open all its public Wi-Fi networks to the approximately 12 million American students who lack internet access at home. Now think about that. In COVID-19, all the kids in the United States had to go to remote learning. And if you did not have access to internet, you wouldn't be able to see us. But think about the families that don't have access to the internet. Their kids can't interact with the teachers. Not to mention all of the other things that happen when schools had to close. All right, like you lose your breakfast and you lose your lunch, which can oftentimes be the only meals that kids get. But this is what Kamala was talking about in terms of making sure that there's equality and equity within our infrastructure in education. She fought predatory organizations for those for-profit college industry as the Attorney General, and like you said, got one of those multi-million-dollar settlements. And obviously, in the Senate, she advocates against the discriminatory lending practices that really devastated the economy over the past decade, and then led to those higher interest rates. So when it comes to education, her bona fides are 100% in lock. And in keeping with what Joe Biden wants to accomplish as president. That's number 11. Reecie, number 12.
Environmental justice. It is such a hugely important thing. Senator Kamala Harris shared an article actually recently that talked about how the environment, meaning people that are subjected to poor air quality, is leading to adverse outcomes in terms of higher infant mortality for Black people and for Black women, and all kinds of adverse impacts. And so she understands, even all the way back when she was district attorney, we mentioned earlier, she created the Environmental Justice Unit because companies were dumping things into Black and brown communities. And so she fought against that. As the senator, she supports the Green New Deal, but more importantly, she supports climate equity. So a lot of times people support solar and they support all these things that sound good, but what they're not as concerned about is making sure that the frontline communities, the people that are most impacted by greenhouse gases and all this pollution, the dumping, bad water, are actually looked after. And so that's what she's done with her Climate Equity Act, which establishes accountability for justice and equity impacts of federal climate and environmental actions. You know, Donald Trump is out here saying drill wherever, do whatever, all that kind of stuff. Well, Senator Kamala Harris's climate equity bill is saying that any kind of actions that would impact these frontline communities, there has to be some clearance for that. And she gives those frontline communities a seat at the table. So when you get Senator Kamala Harris, you're not just getting her, but you're getting her understanding that we need to bring people who have the perspective, who have the experience to the table. There's evidence of that in another area, but I'm going to keep it to this topic. And so that's something that she's been really, really, really strong on. And she's been talking about the water. She has a Water Justice Act, which ensures that we end the Flint, Michigans. And it's not just the Flint, it's a South Bend, Indiana. It's also a Baltimore, Maryland issue. It's throughout the country where we have lead poisoning in the waters, which is leading to behavioral issues, brain issues, all kinds of things in our communities. And it actually changes the trajectory of your life to be subjected to higher levels of lead in our communities. So she has so many different bills, also modernizing the school bus fleet. So there are a lot of things in that, but environmental justice, Senator Kamala Harris has that because, you know, again, she's from California. So California has been hit environmentally from the pollution as well as from the wildfires. So she has experience going back to crisis management, but also understanding the impacts of all of these things. And just one more thing I want to mention about the Water Justice Act. It was $250 billion in critical upgrades to the nation's water infrastructure so that you have testing and remediation for toxic water and affordable water, because that's another issue that Black communities in particular have. In Flint, people were getting charged thousands of dollars for lead and toxic water. And so she wants to make sure that water affordability is something that everybody has, as well as sustainable water. So Senator Kamala Harris has the receipts. She has the action, the executive action, as well as the legislative focus on environmental justice for our communities.
And it's not something that you always hear is, quote, again, a, quote, Black issue. Yet you see how the lack of an environmental justice platform impacts on Black and brown communities disproportionately, which is, of course, leading us to number 13, which is healthcare. And we touched on this a little bit in some of the other areas, because obviously our healthcare is impacted at different categories, but healthcare absolutely deserves its own category in these top 20. It's everything from Black maternal health and tackling the disparities in mortality. She took the lead on telemedicine way before COVID. So now everybody is doing telemedicine, which is a really good stuff. Which is really good stuff. But now this is, I don't want to say anybody's Johnny come lately, but telemedicine has been a part of Kamala's platform for a very, very long time. She's a co-sponsor of the Healthcare Emergency Guarantee Act to eliminate all out-of-pocket health costs for every person in America during the COVID-19 crisis. I can tell you from a personal experience, I am grateful to God that I have insurance, because I'm considered in the vulnerable population as a heart disease survivor. The number one killer of all Americans is heart disease. The number one killer of Black Americans is heart disease. And the number one killer of women in this country is heart disease. And so to be able to put a affordable medical insurance and healthcare in every home saves lives. It simply saves lives. And that's one of the reasons why she was just so forceful in protecting Obamacare with an amicus brief to the Supreme Court as Attorney General. She pushed for paid sick leave way before COVID-19. And she is absolutely committed to providing affordable, comprehensive healthcare with choices of public or private options. You hear these conversations about Medicare for all. Medicare for all, simply in Kamala Harris's estimation, is you can keep your private insurance, but your private insurance better be stepping it up and offering the same thing that Medicare for all does at affordable rates.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And also not requiring that your health insurance follow your job, because people change jobs. They don't stay at the Alcoa plant for 32 years anymore. People move around, and you shouldn't have to be worried about your health care during that time. And that's something that she's been advocating. So healthcare is number 13 on our list. So we have 2, 14, and 15 that are things that you rarely hear discussed in the VEEP sweepstakes. And the first is infrastructure, and the second is intergovernmental coordination. That's 14 and 15. Infrastructure, Reecie, you've talked so much about that today in economic justice and in, in environmental justice.
Yeah.
But infrastructure deals with the broadband, it deals with the water, it deals with cybersecurity at the ports, those kinds of infrastructure. It deals with bridges and tunnels and streets.
And dams, yeah.
Yes, this is the basic things that hold our country up. And these are the issues that Kamala Harris has been supporting and being an active participant in. That's 14. Number 15 is intergovernmental coordination. Okay, and I think you know so much about her work with different agencies.
Absolutely. I mean, as Attorney General, Senator Kamala Harris, I did a thread on this, had so many press conferences where she is up there with different, whether it's different AGs or different agencies within the state of California. And these are long-term projects. A lot of times people want a quick win, right? They put out a bill, they give a nice speech, and maybe it passes, maybe it doesn't. But when we're talking about Senator Kamala Harris, again, back to her executive acumen, she actually took on these long-term projects, years-long projects, to see it through with coordinating with law enforcement. That is a big thing right now where we need to, if we, Lord willing, we pass this Justice and Policing Act, then you have to actually implement it. And so what Senator Kamala Harris has as Attorney General, she has an experience of working with law enforcement, bringing them on board, whether it's the 21st Century Policing Working Group or the Racial and Profiling Advisory Board that she convened when she was AG, and all of these different things. Also, as a senator, she has one of the highest rates of bicameral legislation.
Yes.
That means that her legislation is introduced both in the Senate chamber and in the House chamber. And we've seen a lot of work, a lot of her stuff really get some traction on the House side, whether it's the MORE Act, which was the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment Act with Jerry Nadler, legalizing or decriminalizing marijuana and investing that in communities. Also with Black maternal health, that's some of her provisions have made it through the House. Also, obviously, the biggest thing we've already talked about, the Justice and Policing Act, which she led on, is making its way through the House. Probably will come up to a vote in the House before it does in the Senate. And so that's more intergovernmental coordination. But one of the bigger things too is actually working with the executive branch as a senator on the committees that she serves on. One of the committees that she serves on that has a lot of coordination is the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. Okay, she has oversight over FEMA, the judiciary. Those are the times where we've seen her really take the Trump administration to task. It doesn't always make a headline when somebody sends off a letter, but she has been keeping her foot on the gas and holding these folks accountable and not letting up and letting them know you need to answer these questions and you need to do that, because part of the congressional job is oversight over the executive branch. And so she knows, going back over her entire resume, she has the executive experience, she has the legislative experience, and she knows how things work in both chambers, because you need the House and the Senate to pass a bill, you have reconciliation, and then it goes on the president's desk. So all of those experiences are critically important, of not needing the training wheels, but having the receipts and the acumen to be Biden's right hand, so that he doesn't have to be responsible for wrangling people like he was when he was President Obama's right hand.
You better go ahead and bring those receipts, because intergovernmental coordination for what we're facing as a country is going to be at the top of the list that Biden's going to be considering in picking a vice president. I'm going to tell you that's number 15, but number 16, it's hard for us to describe it, but you know it when you see it. It's called the it factor, it factor. That's number 16. Let me kick the receipts. She has the highest ratings, the largest campaign launch, compelling biography. The memoir Truth We Hold is a New York Times bestseller. Viral cross-examination of Barr and Kavanaugh. I actually have that saved, because when I just want to see a sister do her thing, I go do that, okay? She is was the most requested surrogate in 2018. Biden fundraiser, again, as you said, attracted the largest VEEPSTAKES attendance with the 1,400 attendees. And not to put too fine a point on it, let me just tell you this. Kamala has had these big moments over the years where men have tried to intimidate her, and she always stands up to them.
Mm-hmm.
She did it just yesterday with John Cornyn on police reform. Okay. She got in that behind, didn't she? She got she got in that ass. I'm sorry. She
did. And millions of people saw it.
Everybody saw it. Go, y'all pull that up on YouTube. She let him have it.
Yeah.
In that brilliant, professional, knowledgeable way that she knows how to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she stands up to the chair of the Intelligence Committee, Richard Burr.
Yeah.
Okay, when he tried to silence her, the Homeland Security Committee, what Secretary John Kelly spoke so disrespectfully to her, but she never backs down. She never backs down. She didn't worry about y'all calling her, quote, the angry Black woman, because it's not about being angry.
Right.
Okay, it's about being accurate.
Yeah.
It's about having acumen. It's about putting action into work. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
It's about not just talking the talk or walking the walk. And I think that is very powerful for young women to see.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to be agreeable or back down when you know that it's not right. And Kamala Harris has been that woman for the 30 years that I have known her. So that is the it factor when I'm talking about it. Yeah, I'm passionate about this right here.
Yeah.
As a woman professional, you need to see other women take their rightful place at the table and leave that damn table.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's number 16. That's the it factor.
Mm-hmm. Number 17 is pipeline building. And we put this on the list because everything is so competitive, right? I mean, it's all about, I don't want to lift this person up because they might be my competition one day. But that is not how Senator Kamala Harris operates. She always brings people up with her. As she says, her mom told her, Kamala, you may be the first, but make sure you're not the last. And there is evidence of that throughout her entire career. Let's talk about her Senate staff. She had the most diverse Senate staff of the 2020 presidential candidates. She actually has the second most diverse staff. Senator Brian Schatz, who's been there for longer, has the most diverse staff, but she's right there with him. And she had the most diverse Senate staff where 70% of her office were people of color. She cultivates Black elected officials. Okay, she mentors progressive prosecutors like Kim Foxx. She served on Kim Foxx's transition team. Now, keep in mind, during this time, Senator Kamala Harris had won her Senate seat. She was still Attorney General of California, and she still made time to be on the transition team of a state's attorney in Chicago. So that's the level of dedication that she has. She endorses Black folks in the primary.
Thank you.
2018, she endorsed Stacey Abrams in the primary. She fundraises for Black candidates, and Black candidates are historically disadvantaged when it comes to fundraising. Just on Monday, she led a fundraising drive for Desiree Thames, along with Senator Kristen Gillibrand and Cory Booker, to raise $25,000 for her campaign. She campaigns in tough races, like, for instance, Mayor KEISHA Lance Bottoms. She had a very tough fight getting elected, and Senator Kamala Harris was there at a get out the vote rally, right, days before that election. And we know Marilyn Mosby, who's state's attorney down in Baltimore, she had a tough fight on her hands after she charged those cops, which was absolutely right, Star. You know that.
Yes.
For the killing of Freddie Gray, and she went through it. And you know who was by her side saying we need to put Marilyn Mosby back in that office? It was Senator Kamala Harris, who was out there rallying folks, doing fundraisers, stuff like that. And the other point I mentioned earlier was bringing local leaders to the table. For instance, Latifah Simon, who was a local activist that she convinced to go work for her in the DAs. And they did great work before she became a DA and together a DA, and she's continued on to do amazing things. But she really cares about having stakeholders as part of the decision-making process.
That's pipeline building like nobody's building. It's called reaching back.
Mm-hmm.
My friend Donna Brazil always says, when you get a seat at the table, your job is to scooch over and make room for somebody else. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
And that's like in Kamala's DNA.
Mm-hmm.
If there's another woman of color to support, she's out there supporting them. And that's one of the reasons why I always end our conversations with, sister, you don't owe me, any thanks because I'm here to back you. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is just the way a rising tide lifts all boats. And she has ascribed to that throughout her career. And she's just been somebody that you can depend on. We've got two more. Number 18. Yeah. Number 18. Now, if there's an issue that she shouts to the rooftops all the time, it's the issue of poverty in America.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that people realize that poverty in America is a major thing.
Right.
If you can go to your refrigerator and open it up and there be something in there, you don't think about poverty like that.
Right.
But there are currently 44 million people in the United States living in poverty. And Kamala Harris has been at the forefront of things like the LIFT Act, which lifts 9.6 million people out of poverty. That is per the Columbia Center on Service and Policy.
Yeah.
Like the Rent Relief Act, which lifts 7.8 million out of poverty. She has had 2 of the 5 plans analyzed, and hers was the first and the third most impactful. And we're talking versus a whole bunch of other people's plans, because I'm not trying to denigrate nobody else's plan.
Right.
But her plan was considered to be the most impactful. Okay. Yeah. And on this poverty issue, ending the Homeless Act of 2019, we have 500,000 homeless people. 14 billion investment leads to over 400,000 in new affordable housing, using vouchers and new construction, and it effectively ends chronic homelessness. And I'm so proud that it's a bicameral relationship with our Auntie Maxine, okay? Congresswoman Maxine Waters, who's another straight no chaser, okay? So when it comes to poverty, I know it's not on a lot of people's top of mind, but it needs to be, because it impacts disproportionately on the Black and the brown communities, and poor white communities across our nation. People should not go to bed at night hungry or worrying about whether or not they'll have something to eat the next day. And Kamala has put comprehensive programs in place. We're down to the last 2. Number 19 is temperament.
And we know that Senator Kamala Harris has grace under pressure, far more grace. I think I can speak for both of us than we have.
Right, exactly. You may say that. Yes, you may.
And she rises to the occasion. I mean, these viral moments came out of high stakes situations. They were not viral for the sake of being viral. They were viral because of the way that she handled it. Even though people were throwing stuff at her, even though people were being belligerent, but she broke them down. But she's very gracious under pressure. People underestimate the gravity that was on Senator Kamala Harris as being only the 3rd Black woman to run for a major party's nomination. That was historic. And I really hate that wasn't really emphasized enough, and she wasn't given enough credit for that with all the headwinds against her. And when I say headwinds, let me make it very clear for you. There was an analysis done on 200,000 tweets after the debate, after the June debate. 181,975,000 of the attacks were solely out of 200,000. Let me repeat that. 181,795,000 out of 200,000 attacks were to Kamala Harris herself. This was a time when 25 other people were in the race. And so she has been attacked mercilessly, relentlessly for years, actually. She was attacked, and it wasn't over policy disagreements. There's another chart I can pull out. I have receipts that shows what she was attacked on. The policy made up about this much. This much was on character, was attacking her as a person. And do you know how just absolutely devastating and heartbreaking that could be if you weren't as strong as Senator Kamala Harris to be attacked on your character to that degree, when you have spent decades working to try to improve the criminal justice system, to try to make this country a better place. And yet she persevered, and she is stronger than ever. All of the things are going in her way. We don't know if she's going to make it on a ticket. We hope that she does. That's what we're doing this for. But the polling is heading in her way. All of the smears and the lies thrown at her, people are seeing for themselves that she has the temperament, that she has the perspective that's really needed to usher in this next chapter and really take on these tough challenges and not throw in the towel because she's being challenged or because she's losing a news cycle that day.
Yeah, I'm telling you, she's somebody who believes very strongly that a fire needs oxygen to breathe, and she does not breathe on bullshit fires. And that's just the best way for me to put it. And yes, you're right. She's a much better temperament than either one of us do, because everybody that knows the two of us, intergenerationally, you will get to cuss out.
I'm ready to put my dukes up.
You will get to cuss out.
Kamala, and I'm here with it.
Exactly. But
that's what we're here for.
Honey, and that brings us to the last one, and it's appropriately the last one, and that's women's equality is number 20. It's women's equality. I don't even know where to start, but I'll start with the thing that we talk about all the time. She agrees that the start for women's equality starts with closing the pay gap. That is it. It starts with closing the pay gap between men and women. Y'all can fight about that pay gap all you want to, but women still make 80% of what white men make, and that's white women, okay?
Yeah.
Black women are at about 63 in the 60s.
Yeah.
And Latina women are even lower than that, okay?
Yeah.
So we're very clear on that. And we do not get the discount for being a woman when we go to the store. We don't get that discount.
No.
Closing that pay gap is absolutely urgent. And she has been fighting because of the number of women who are now heads of households. And when you're the head of household, a disparity in your pay can change the trajectory of your family's life.
Right.
And that is why that is one of her front burner issues, as well as the.
And can I just add in there, because for Black women, they are the breadwinners in 80% of their households.
There it is.
Whether it's single or married, the breadwinner in 80% of their households. And that lifetime wage gap specifically for a Black woman is $800,000. That's the impact of a wage gap in our lifetime. So her attention during the campaign in her proposal to close that wage gap is actually, again, another one of those bottoms up changes that really could have an immediate impact on people's lives.
Not to mention reproductive freedom. Get out of our bodies. Is what we say. Mind your business. Let women make the choices that they need to make for themselves and their families, and only have these conversations with their daughters and with their sons for responsible and with their doctors on what decisions they need to make for their family. You don't have nothing to do with it. Okay?
Right.
And her proposals from the time she was in state and local government and support for reproductive freedom are things that everybody has seen over these years. So being on the right side of women equality, again, starts with closing that pay gap. Is a part of Kamala Harris's DNA. There is no question whatsoever.
And I just want to add one more thing on the reproductive justice thing, because during the campaign, one thing that was so ingenious and unique and a really innovative idea was she wanted to approach reproductive rights the same way that we approach the Voting Rights Act, which is these states that have a history of these putting in forth these repressive and oppressive policies to attack reproductive rights, which are still under assault, particularly in Republican states. She wanted to put in a pre-clearance requirement. This was executive action in which the states had to actually get approval from the Department of Justice before any of their restrictions on reproductive rights went into place. And so that's really important, because the way that it is now is we rely on Planned Parenthood and all these other organizations to file these court challenges so that we can keep Planned Parenthood open, where they want to close down the only clinic that does more than reproductive justice. Is not just about, having abortions, it's about health as well.
There you are.
And so that was really, really, really innovative. And that was something I hadn't mentioned throughout the thing. She had so many innovative proposals. And again, that's where it goes to that unique lens that she brings and making a way out of no way. What hasn't been done and how are we going to figure out how to get it done, even if there's
very solution oriented, Reece.
Yes.
Instead of that can't be done, her attitude is how do we do it? Okay.
Exactly.
And that's just those kind of innovative ideas that really are going to change this country for the better. We've gone through 20, and I have put all 20 of them up in the YouTube chat. We're going to actually put our 20 list out on both of our channels and both of our platforms so that you can have this debate yourself.
Yeah.
You know, as we start to close out, we see that you all have been 100% engaged. We hope that this has been helpful for you as you start to look at how to evaluate the candidates, to evaluate who is in the running for the VEEP sweepstakes, or the VEEPSTAKES as they call it. But make sure that they're being vetted and treated through the same lens. And so I just would like to invite others to use this model to present their views of other potential candidates. Any other ladies that we started the conversation with, or anybody that we may have left off, somebody that you think that you'd like to support. Use the 20 for 20 list and continue the conversation, but make it a substantive evaluation of credentials rather than a symbolic look at the cosmetics of picking a Black woman vice president, because we bring something to the table other than an appetite. And Kamala Harris does it with all the receipts open for you to review.
Yes. And I'm putting together, you know, Star and I are sharing this, but on my Medium post, y'all, I see y'all always share the 50 accomplishments from Kamala Harris. We're going to put together a study guide, this 20 for 20, with the stuff that we've discussed, the receipts that we brought, in a Medium post that you can share. So, and we're going to embed this video so you can watch the video, replay, or you can, you know, look at all of the receipts, because we want you to continue this conversation. And again, create your own receipts for your own candidate that you want to support. But we have to stop this reductive and degrading conversation that puts Black women in a cosmetics box, like we're Mary Kay, rather than in the credentials box, which is the ballot box. That's where we need to be checked off of. The only box we need to be on is the ballot box. So, Star, I really appreciate this time with you.
Love just sitting here having a conversation with a smart sister who does her research and is as nerdy as I am when it comes to politics, but as fierce as I am when it comes to defending what is right and who we know would make one amazing vice president for these United States. And so it was a pleasure to work with you. I know that we're going to do this again. This cannot be the last time. As I said to you, you got an auntie for life.
I love you. It's such an honor. You're an icon. I tip my hat to you, and looking forward to more wonderful, wonderful collaborations.
Fantastic. Look forward to the next time. And everybody, thank y'all for watching. And we'll be continuing to share this information because it is out there. And by the way, you can check every single one of these facts and figures. Because you know I'm not putting nothing out there that we have not looked at and made sure that it is accurate. Okay?
Period.
Thank y'all, everyone.